Hello, everybody. Welcome to Project HR, a podcast dedicated to building better workplaces. As always, I'm your host, Beth Pilgreen, and our topic today is the concept of alignment leadership, a concept created by our guest today, Chris Meroff. Chris is the executive director and owner of MSB Ventures, as well as the creator of the management consultant company, Alignment Leadership. And as if that weren't enough, he is also the author of the book Align, 4 Simple Steps for Leaders to Create Employee Fulfillment Through Alignment Leadership. Chris, we are so glad to have you with us today.
Beth, thanks for having me on. It's great to be here.
Oh, good. I can't wait to get into it. Now, I've been reading up on Align as well as your work with Alignment Leadership. And I have to say that the thing I love most about this concept is the fact that it's such a practical, step-by-step way of connecting with employees. I can absolutely see how this approach could really create the kind of collaborative and motivated workplaces that I think everyone would love to have.
Absolutely.
Well, I'd love to start with you, Chris. I understand your early working experiences weren't the most motivating.
Yeah, it's interesting. I get a lot of questions around what made me come up with the concept or the idea of alignment leadership. And the reality is, like all of us, we all go to work maybe early on in our careers with this excitement and this desire to really make an impact in a way, kind of create a name for ourselves. And so, early on, I had the great experience to work with my parents, and for me, it was a dream come true to be able to have instant value at work. Having parents, loving parents. It really created a great workplace experience, but that quickly kind of took a turn that I wasn't expecting. When value is talked about as far as who we are as people, it's easy when you think about, well, of course your parents value you, but do they value you in the workplace? And so for me, it was a journey to figure out, well, of course they still value me, but did they value me as an employee or as somebody in their company that they could trust? And that question became kind of day to day. And I think that's most people's experience. It becomes kind of a moving target. If we succeed or we accomplish something or we do something well, then we have value. When we're not producing at the level of expectation, from our bosses or leaders, then all of a sudden we feel like we don't have value. And so that really prompted me to figure out, how do I remove the moving target of value for not only myself, but my employees?
That's brilliant. How would you say that you define alignment leadership?
So alignment leadership is really the ability for a team, and that can be defined any way you want to, but any group of people, and whether that's at work or outside of work, it's really a way that you can get on the exact same page.
Mm-hmm.
And so the way that we describe alignment leadership is really this unity, where you can feel as though we already agree on where we're going. And so therefore, we don't have to always lord over this idea of authority or, I'm the boss. You can really partner with your team in a way that allows for the conversation to be free flowing. In other words, you're not just doing it based on a hierarchy, but you're having these conversations. You're experiencing the workplace in a way that allows everyone to win all the time. Really, alignment leadership is about creating win-wins for both employers and employees.
I love that. It sounds like at the heart of this concept is the idea of leaders helping employees find personal fulfillment in their work.
That's right.
Why is finding this kind of meaning in the workplace so important to employees?
Well, I think it's always been there, where I think we're designed to be to work. I think we find satisfaction in that. We find joy in that. I know that there's this concept of, well, there are people in the world that are lazy, but I still think that they still live outside of fulfillment, because fulfillment is this effort that we put in to something, and then we feel like, hey, this was worth it. I didn't waste my time. Anybody who's a time waster by nature, they still feel like they wasted time. And so what I believe that this fulfillment really comes out of understanding where and agreeing where we're going, and understanding where your effort plays into it. So for me, this idea of fulfillment is really a concept that we all, I think, understand, but we don't know how to articulate it, especially at work. So a lot of times people will say, well, I really find the hobbies or my family really fulfilling. And that's a good thing, but it's also sad that there's not fulfillment found at work. And that's something that we're trying to solve by creating this concept of leadership that is really about unity.
Is it fair to say that alignment leadership requires a servant leadership approach?
It absolutely does. And by servant leadership, the way I really try to define that for people is leadership in our organizations. And at the core of alignment leadership is we define leadership as loving and serving people toward fulfillment. And so this concept of loving people, well, we try to define that for everyone to understand that it's really a self-sacrifice. So when I say you want to love people toward fulfillment, it's really kind of dying to yourself and really living for those that have been entrusted to your care, to your leadership. And so that's a huge part of it. And then we have the serving part. Well, that really is about understanding how to communicate value to your people, really serving them toward their value. And that's where I think fulfillment will come.
Not to use the word love, I was about to say, I love, I love that you use the word love in that description.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not often talked about at work. In fact, it took me a long time to figure out that that was an okay thing to talk about at work. It gets there are so many rules that we play by at work that are kind of handed down generation to generation,
Mhm.
and it took me a long time to figure out that that's an acceptable way to communicate how we treat each other. But once I embraced it, it really did open the door for people to feel that they have intrinsic value, that they're not just a cog in a wheel. They're not just valuable because of what they can do, but they're actually valuable for who they are. And
Mhm.
that to me is the concept of loving.
Yeah, no, I love that. Again, I do. I appreciate that. I respect that. Because, like you
Yeah,
said in the very beginning in our intro, you don't want to feel like a moving target because that causes everyone to walk on pins and needles, and it's a roller
exactly.
coaster of value at work and respect, seemingly receiving respect at
Yep.
work. And that's no way to live. If you're going to spend so much time at your place of work, it doesn't need to feel that chaotic on the inside, you know?
No, it does not. There's definitely a way that you can show up at work, and you don't have to live under this concept of like work-life balance.
Mhm.
That really doesn't exist. You figure out like the concept of balance means that somebody's winning and somebody's losing. Either work is winning or home life is winning, but
Mm.
rarely do both win when you have a work-life balance mentality. I love to operate with this concept of work life integration. It's really hard to be fulfilled at home when I'm unfulfilled at work, and vice versa.
Oh, that's so true. Goodness gracious.
We try to create that circle that says that all of it's important. Like you said, you're away from home the vast majority of your waking hours.
Yeah,
We don't want to live in unfulfillment just because we're away from family.
agreed. It makes me so sad too, and I know this does upset you when you meet somebody and they just hate their job. I mean, that's just gotta
Yes.
make your heart sink since this is such a passion of yours.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's sad, and the fact is, right now they're about well, the statistics are about over 70% of people are not. They don't love their job or they don't love who they work with, and
Oh,
that's
man.
incredibly discouraging.
Yes, it is. Okay, well, a lot of the process, let's talk about Align. A lot of the process outlined in Align and practice at your company, alignment leadership, involves eliminating uncertainty. Can you tell us
Yes,
why uncertainty is such a problem?
yeah, it's everybody talks about or we refuse to talk about the elephant in the room,
Mhm.
and whether it's this concept of well, I'm being told what to do, but I don't agree with it, so I don't voice that, or whether it's I don't like the work that's being produced. It can come from either direction, but those things that are unsaid create uncertainty. And when you don't know where you stand with someone, it creates this anxiety, and the vast majority of us operate within that anxiety, both personally and
I
professionally.
was just thinking I can relate to that on
Yeah,
such a personal level.
yeah, we all do. We all operate in that, and we hate it, and yet we don't really do anything about it. So the framework of the book is to help create conversation points to eliminate that uncertainty. to kind of force conversation around things that
It's
we
great.
we want to avoid, but we do it in a way that's a fair playing field for everyone.
I can't wait to talk more about those points. But we're going to take a break to recognize our sponsor, and then we'll be right back to continue with our conversation. Thanks for listening. Also, thanks to A Better Leader for supporting this week's episode of Project HR. A Better Leader is leadership training that brings your leaders into alignment. A Better Leader's online platform improves engagement and morale and directly affects your bottom line. Get your free 2-week trial at abetterleader.com. We're back, everybody. Okay, so now that we understand what's at stake, removing the uncertainty and allowing fulfillment to flourish, let's take a look at how to put the concept of alignment leadership into motion. It's a 4-step process, right?
Hmm.
And can you give us an overview of those steps?
Absolutely. So the first step is to really define and understand culture of your organization, your team, whatever that looks like. That's really important. And I spend about half the book talking about step
Hmm.
one. It's so foundational to move forward that we could spend a lot of time on just understanding what culture is and then how to shape culture. So that's really step one. Step two gets into understanding how to leverage what you've defined as your culture and your purpose to then prioritize all your time. Step three is then how to take those prioritized tasks and projects and apply them or really assign them to the resources, to the people that you have in your organization based on the value that they bring and not just what they know or what they can do, but who they are, their passions. And then when you have those 3 steps down really, really well, where you've created alignment around those 3, now you can move on to my favorite part, which is this idea of success planning for the employee. And that success planning is broader than just, and we'll get into this, but it's broader than just kind of coming up with a performance review. It's so much deeper than that.
Oh, good. Because you just spend an hour on that performance review and you go over it, and then you either go back to your desk feeling terrible or like you did something good that year.
That's right. That's right.
Okay, so those 4 steps that you just said, those have to be in chronological order. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, well, moving with the first one, culture. You said you wrote over half the book on culture. What do you exactly mean when you refer to culture?
Yeah, culture is that, I don't know, it's a word that started for me 10 years ago. I started to read business books, leadership books, and they're all talking about culture. And I would sit there and scratch my head after and wonder, I don't even understand what my culture is. I don't know how to define culture, let alone evaluate it, whether I have a good one or a bad one. And it was so confusing to me. But I knew I needed a good culture. I just didn't know how to get there. I didn't even know how to start. So I don't know if this is the right definition, but this is the definition that we've come up with to help us start to evaluate what culture we actually have. We simply define it this way. The culture is the sum of the worldviews of the folks in the room. So whatever that looks like. And so culture of an organization, if you have 200 people in your company, it is the sum of all 200
Hmm.
worldviews put together. And so then we started to figure out, well, what does a worldview look like? Well, a worldview we define it by 5 traits of a worldview. It is going to be your experiences, your traditions, your hopes, your preferences. And the fifth one, which we're going to talk about the most, is belief. Those 5 traits really create your worldview. It's how you show up to every meeting, every conversation. It's what you bring with you before you even enter into a conversation. It's your worldview. And what we try to do is we don't try to um, grade anybody's worldview. We're not saying, well, you have a good one and you have a bad one. No, we're just simply saying that our culture is the sum of all those worldviews. And in fact, we want to be able to celebrate the diversity that that brings. There's power and there is innovation and there is collaboration that is created through the diversity of people's worldviews. So I defined culture in that way. But what I really wanted to do is obviously not just define culture, we want to shape our culture. If we say that we want a specific kind of culture, then we have to have a starting place, and that's where that definition comes in. But then we also want to have a tool or an ability to shape that culture to what the culture that we want our organization to be known as. And so the way that we shape that is we really define a purpose for the organization. And the purpose is more than a statement, it's a living, breathing tool that we use to define the destination or define the journey that we're about to go on together. So I keep saying this in relation to like an organization, but it can be a team. Man, it can be a friend group. It could be your family. It doesn't matter. You're going to define where you're going. So it's not enough to say, hey, does anybody want to go to New York City with me? We want to define where in New York City and why we're going to go there. That gives people a choice. Do I want to go on the trip or not? If somebody really loves New York City, but they hate going to art museums, but the only reason I'm going there is to art museums, they deserve to know that so they can choose whether they want to go on the journey or not. And so that's what defining purpose is really for. It's really identifying for people where we're going so they can decide if this is a journey they want to go on.
Sure.
But we can shape it with purpose. And we're going to talk about that very specifically through the other 3 steps of alignment leadership. The other way that we shape it is through what we call guiding principles. A lot of companies call them core values. They are soft skills that we agree we're going to hold each other accountable to. And the reason you have to have those is not enough to decide that we're going to go on this journey together. We have to agree on how we're going to treat each other on the journey. And so we do that through these guiding principles, and we define them really, really well. We don't just put slogans up on a website, but we spend the vast majority of our time in professional development in organizations talking about the complexities and the variables around these soft skills. One example would be and I bring this one up all the time because it's the one, honestly, I probably struggle with the most, which is learning with humility. Well, that means that in every conversation, we're not using it for behavioral management, but we are using it as a way to hold each other accountable to be learners and also to do that learning through humility. So we just talk about it all the time. Well, why do I do that? Because I want our organization to be defined from the outside as an organization that learns with humility. So those guiding principles are what you're going to be known as in whatever sector you're in or whatever community you're a part of. And so those 2 ways, purpose and guiding principles, are how you shape whatever culture you have today.
That's great. Well said. Talk to me about the role belief plays in all of this and how that impacts employee engagement.
Absolutely. So when we talk about the 5 traits of a worldview, and we talk about this concept of belief, of all the traits of a worldview, belief is the only one that demands action. In fact, I say it this way: I can tell you what I believe in, but really what you have to do is look at my calendar and my bank account to understand what I really believe in.
Wow.
Um, the reality of belief always comes with action. And so what we want to do is we want to hire people who believe deeply in the journey or the purpose that we're going to embark on. So as an example, one of the companies that I own is in the K-12 market. In fact, we work with public schools specifically. Well, we would not want to, for instance, hire someone who believes that the public school systems are flawed or they believe in private education, because that would be counteractive
Hmm.
or counterintuitive to the journey that we're about to take, which is to help support public schools. So you have to make sure that you're leveraging the belief of an employee toward this journey, this purpose that you've set out, this journey that you're on. So you've got to make sure that you're shaping your culture based on somebody's belief. And you can only do that by really understanding your employees. That's why we also have the concept of hiring slow and firing fast. It's because
That's
the
good.
slowness that you're bringing someone on, you really have to explore what their beliefs are. You have to understand, can it align to the purpose of your
Mhm.
organization or even the purpose of the role that you're hiring them for?
Okay, Chris. So we've got our corporate purpose sorted out, the purpose for the department, for the individual employee roles, the core values, all things that make up an organization's culture. Now we move on to the second step, which is tasks. What is this step about?
Yeah, so you've got this purpose, right? This journey, this destination that we want to go on. You've got the right people. You've done the hard work to build your team of people who believe in this journey. Now we have to go and identify what we're going to do next. It's like any journey you're going on. You're like, well, what's the first thing that we're going to do to accomplish this journey or to get to this destination? And so that's why we have to prioritize every minute of every day. I know that that can sound a little bit like micromanaging, or we're going to get into the weeds, but you really have to until your people can start to prioritize their own tasks based on that journey. So if you start on this journey and you want to get to this destination together, you both believe in it. What you're not going to do is you're not going to get bogged down by really beating each other up over the methodology by which we're going to get there. This is the freedom. So two people on the path, on the same path toward the same destination, can decide to get there in two different ways, and that needs to be celebrated, not put down. And so prioritizing tasks, it really removes a lot of that uncertainty, because you can then, at the end of a task, let's say it was the wrong one at the wrong time, now you're not pointing fingers. Now you're just looking at each other and saying, well, that wasn't the best way to do it. Let's figure out a new
Cross that
way.
off.
It just
Yeah.
removes, yeah, it removes this uncertainty of like, is my boss going to be happy with what I did and when I did it? The boss is not going to feel like, I wonder what they're working on, if it's the right thing, or if I'm just going there and fix it. No, they're on the same page because they prioritized their time together.
I love that. Would you say that that's more of an individually based task? Uh, or would that be more of a, like, your leadership develops these tasks or these lists that each individual would then carry out? Like, who is the one that actually sets these lists?
Yeah, that's a great question. And this is one that we get all the time, which is like, yeah, do I, as the leader, serve them by giving them the task list? Or do I, as the leader, like let
Hmm.
them kind of develop? And it's a hybrid in that you want to do it as a team, whatever that team looks like, because you really want them to step up in ownership. And the way that you'll know if they're there is going to be dependent on how well they're able to contribute in that meeting. And that doesn't mean that you're now going to walk away and think to yourself, well, that person's way behind. Now you'll know you need to go follow up with them individually. So you're going to do it as a group, you're going to have the conversation, and then you're going to follow up individually to make sure that everyone is on board and okay with the priorities that were set as a group. But the group does need to agree that this is what we're doing, so that there's no finger pointing or backbiting later on. Again, unity.
Right. And that's just accountability too.
Exactly. You got it.
Yeah. We're going to take a quick break and then we'll be right back. You're listening to the Project HR podcast. I'm your host, Beth Pilgreen, and our guest today is Chris Meroff, entrepreneur, leader, creator, and author of Align: 4 Simple Steps for Leaders to Create Employee Fulfillment Through Alignment Leadership. Okay, so we just covered steps 1 and 2. Now that we have our purposes and our priorities set, next step is resources. What kind of resources are we talking about here?
Human resources. And it is the greatest
Oh,
resource that we have. And yet we waste it because we don't take the time to allow ourselves as leaders to see people for who they are. And so what this process is, it's less about a clinical idea of like delegating tasks. And it's more about having conversations as a group or a team to let people step up and into particular tasks or projects that they feel designed to be able to contribute towards. And so, if you've done the work and you've really communicated the destination, the purpose, and you've got somebody who agrees to it, and then you've done the hard work of prioritizing all the time and all the tasks in a way that gives, again, this joint ownership, well, then it would make sense that somebody's going to be able to say, hey, I know this really needs to get done, this really hard, terrible task that nobody wants to do. But because I believe in where we're going, I believe in what we're trying to do. And because of who I am and what I can contribute, I'll take that task. And that's really what you're trying to get to.
and would you say too, the foundation of somebody even saying, I believe in this, would the foundation you'd have to have a firm foundation on trust.
Absolutely.
If you really trust the person above you and who is giving you your assignments, then you're more apt to say, okay, I'm going to figure out a way to do this, even if it's not a very fun thing where it's a conflicting task to cross off.
You're absolutely right. Trust has to be a huge foundation, and that's why loving and serving people toward fulfillment is kind of our definition of leadership, because I believe that there's like this, I don't know, this concept where trust is earned,
Hmm.
and I don't really agree or disagree necessarily with that statement, but I know that trust is established when I love and serve people authentically. They will trust me, and that has to be a big part of this process, is that you must lay that foundation, and you must celebrate the diversity of their worldview, and
Hmm.
you can't sit in criticism because they don't see the world like you do. You must celebrate that diversity. That all of those things together really establish trust, and like you said, that's foundational for people to really show up.
No, that's great. And I think it goes back to just valuing them as humans as opposed to just the tasks and the skills that they bring.
Yeah, and it's funny, well, it's funny to me anyway, or ironic, that HR gets truncated to HR. It's really sad in a way,
Great
because
point.
yeah, it's really about human beings. And a couple generations ago, even my generation, I'm a Gen X, and the reality is I'm only loyal to a company because my parents told me I should be. Because
Hmm.
the baby boomers were told by the greatest generation that you stick with a job forever. So we've kind of dumbed down our leadership into this concept of command and control, and
Hmm.
we've lost sight of the fact. And one of the ways we did that is we truncated that down to HR. We've eliminated the human interaction, and the reality is, I mean, my business is, well, I'm in trouble. I have nothing to offer. I'm not clever enough of an owner to have a better mousetrap. My better mousetrap are having better human beings. And so that to me is the key to all of this, and understanding how I need to show up each and every day.
Very, very much appreciate that. Okay, well, let's get back to your fourth step, Chris. Employee success. This is about creating a personal success plan for your employees. Is that right?
It is. This is probably the most difficult and complex conversation that we have with our leaders, because employee success plans, man, that sounds like a much better path than your performance reviews. And so you have a lot of leaders who will jump on this and be like, yeah, I want to get there as soon as possible. We tell our leaders you can't get there until you've created alignment from the employee to you as the leader. And that path to alignment is understanding purpose, understanding how to prioritize tasks, and then that concept of resource allocation. And so those first three steps must be done in order for that employee to align to you as the leader. The fourth step now, that gives you freedom to align to your employee. And that alignment through success planning is far less about an actual written plan than it is for that leader to start to imagine the future for that employee. And that future, that it should not just include or just be limited to the workplace or to your company. It is like thinking to yourself, man, I see this person in this way, and they have so much value in this way. I could see them doing X or Y. I really could imagine them doing amazing things, and then communicating that effectively with that employee.
Okay, and literally all of what you were saying goes back to, I feel like, just in the most prestigious way possible, valuing them as humans. I very much appreciate how you guide people into not just seeing them working at X company, right?
Right.
It
Yep.
is, because they have these skills, they're probably not going to stay with you for 40 years. This is 2020. I mean, hello.
Exactly.
Yeah. I'm also a Generation Xer. And my parents, yeah, they just instilled in me loyalty. Stick with the company. I mean, stick with the company forever. My mom has worked at the same place for almost 40 years.
That's right.
And it's different these days. So I appreciate that you coach people into seeing the broader scope of your employee.
Yeah, and it's so impactful for the leader. I mean, we talk about how this really brings employees to fulfillment, but I've never experienced a leadership fulfillment in my life until I practice these things. And so, yes, it's about your employees, but as a leader, this is the greatest feeling you'll ever have, is when you can start to see people for who they are. You can understand their value, and we talk about this value as it relates to you. Don't make this generic value. We kind of laugh about when you walk into a room and you tell someone, man, you're really awesome. That's just honestly, that doesn't accomplish anything. You want to really communicate how, man, when you walk into the room, you make everyone feel like we can accomplish anything together. See, that's very specific and
Mm-hmm.
it's very personal.
Mm-hmm.
And that value then gets translated into everything that they do. This process has unlocked for my employees productivity levels that I've never seen before. So this isn't just some warm and fuzzy, hey, let's just all feel good about what we do. No, I'm also a business owner. In fact, I own several businesses, and the success of those businesses is directly tied to an increased amount of productivity that I could never have imagined. See, it has to create a win-win,
Mm-hmm.
both for the employee and for the employer. And that's why I believe so strongly in alignment leadership.
That's awesome, Chris. Do you think any leader can practice alignment leadership? And can it be engaged in a big company just as easily as it can be engaged in a small one?
Absolutely. In fact, one of the things that we talk about, because we work with companies of all sizes, and one of the things that we talk about with our leaders is, um, it's kind of like the reality of when you think big as a
Mhm.
leader, or when you think about all that you have to do, it kind of paralyzes you. So what we really try to do with alignment leadership is to get leaders to think small. It's in the small interactions of the day. It's less in these grandiose action or leadership decisions that you make, and it's more specific to the person who's in front of you. One of the things that I do, and we encourage our leaders to do, is review your calendar in the morning. Look at not the topics of the meetings, but look at the people who will be in the meetings and start to prepare yourself early on to figure out how you need to show up so that that person can be successful. And so, if it's literally that small, then anybody can do it, number one. And number two, it should be effective in any organization.
Love that. I love that so much. Okay, well, let's talk about your company. The good news is, and all that we've talked about, these leaders don't have to go this way alone if they don't want to. Your company, Alignment Leadership, conducts workshops on how to do this, and they even hold one on one consulting sessions. Can you tell us a little bit more about what you guys offer?
Absolutely. The best thing about what we're doing is that it's completely customized to whatever an organization or a company needs at that moment, and even their assessment of their own needs. We walk through them. We walk through that process with them so that they can really evaluate what they're looking for. A lot of people will reach out to us and say, "Hey, I'm looking for leadership development," and our first few questions are going to be trying to uncover, well, what specifically are you looking for? If you're just looking at kind of checking a box that says, hey, we're doing leadership development, we're probably not going to be a great fit because we're going to be asking some pretty probing questions about not only you and the upper levels of leadership, but even your employees. And so we just are really hands on because we believe so desperately that every employee should be able to have this experience of fulfillment at work. And so we just throw our full selves into it. And that comes in many different forms. You mentioned we have workshops that we put on locally. We do that. Also, we have web based seminars or webinars that we put together. We have video series that you can
That's great.
download and look at. So you can get whatever level of involvement that you want us, we're willing to do.
Well, on another note, Chris, you've started a podcast this month, right?
We did. Yes.
Can you tell us a little bit about Excellent Failures?
Yes, it is a podcast that's really dedicated to my failures as a leader, as a man, as an employee, and all of those fail. See, I love failing because failing always leads to learning, and so I like to celebrate that. We talk about all the time in our organization. I will always reward excellent failures and punish mediocre success.
Wow.
And so we love to celebrate our failures because that's the only way I've gotten where I am. So, yeah, it's a podcast dedicated to making sure leaders understand they're not alone and failing is fun because you get to learn.
I love your perspective. And I'm writing down what you just said: celebrate excellent failures and punish mediocre success. I
Yes.
would say most leaders would probably just, they would celebrate any success, even if it is minimal to mediocre. So I appreciate that. No, the focus here can be on the failure because that's where you succeed from there and you don't do that again. And
You
that's where
do.
you learn.
Yeah, I tell people all the time in life, if I fail more than you, I win.
Wow, that is so good. I'm got so many quotable sentences that you've said. Okay, Chris. Well, I want to remind all of our listeners that Chris's book, Align, 4 Simple Steps for Leaders to Create Employee Fulfillment Through Alignment Leadership, is currently available on Amazon, and we'll have a link to it in the episode companion. We'll also include info on how to contact Alignment Leadership in case you want to schedule one of those workshops or a one-on-one. And we'll have a link to his brand new podcast, Excellent Failures. But now, Chris, it's time for our lightning round questions. And these are the questions we ask every guest of the podcast. Are you ready to give it a shot?
I am ready to go.
Topic showdown. Today we've been talking about alignment. In your opinion, which is better, when the stars are aligned or when your tires are aligned?
Oh, I'm going to go with tires for sure.
What's the worst job interview question you've ever been asked?
The worst job, I would say, man, I haven't been on a job interview since I was 22, and it was my parents. So they basically were asking me, do I really want a full-time job? And at the time, I did think I did. So that was pretty tough.
Okay. What's your favorite thing about working in management consulting?
My favorite thing is seeing those aha moments in people's eyes when they realize they can do it.
Love that. What's the best piece of advice you've ever been given?
Unify in every aspect of my life so that I don't have to feel like I'm alone.
Wonderful. Who or what inspires you?
My faith inspires most of who I am today, but I also have a really, really good friend of mine, best friend of mine, who now lives in Australia, and he has inspired the person who's talking to you today the most.
Amazing. Well, Chris, thanks for joining me today on Project HR.
Thanks for having me. It's been great.
Yeah, I've loved talking to you. And thanks too to our listeners. Once again, don't forget to grab the companion for this episode at projectionsinc.com/podcast. In it, you'll find notes, links, resources, and more. Also, if you'd like to be on Project HR or know someone who would, feel free to visit us online at projectionsinc.com/podcast or email us at projecthr@projectionsinc.com. Finally, we'd love for you to rate us 5 stars on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, or wherever you get your content. Your ratings help more people to find us online, so thank you in advance for helping us grow. Reviews count too, so please feel free to let us know how we're doing and what topics you might like us to cover in the future. That's it from me for now. Let's make it a great day at work.